Museum of Nightmares. In this video, you'll hear a terrifying story about the Museum of Nightmares. Two best friends visit a new art exhibition that's causing a stir. When visitors start disappearing, they discover the mannequins are linked to an ancient cult that offered human sacrifices. These mannequins come to life, trapping visitors who must now fight for their lives. What happens next? Watch to uncover the chilling events. Part 1. The Unveiling. I never thought an art exhibition could be so unnerving. My best friend Liam and I were always on the lookout for the weird and wonderful in our small town. The opening of a new exhibition at the local art museum seemed like the perfect way to spend a Saturday night. Rumors swirled about the Museum of Nightmares, as it was dubbed. Whispers of eerie mannequins and dark, mysterious origins filled the air, but we shrugged them off. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to check it out. The museum, an old Victorian mansion, stood on the edge of town, its once majestic facade now draped in shadows. The air felt colder as we approached, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and made you shiver despite yourself. We exchanged uneasy glances but pressed on, our footsteps echoing in the deserted street. Inside, the atmosphere was even more chilling. Dim lighting cast long, flickering shadows, and a strange metallic scent lingered in the air. The exhibition room was filled with mannequins, each one more grotesque and lifelike than the last. They were arranged in disturbing tableaux, depicting scenes of anguish and despair. Their eyes seemed to follow us as we moved through the room, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "These are something else," Liam muttered, trying to mask his unease with a forced chuckle. I nodded, unable to find my voice. As we wandered deeper into the exhibition, we noticed a door slightly ajar at the end of the hall. A sign above it read, "Restricted Access." Naturally, our curiosity was piqued. Without a second thought, we pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was small and dimly lit, filled with more mannequins, but these were different. They seemed even more lifelike, their features etched with a haunting realism. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror. Its surface was cracked, and it seemed to pulse with a dark energy. "What do you think this is all about?" Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, but it's giving me the creeps," I replied. "Let's get out of here." As we turned to leave, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. We both jumped, our hearts racing. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as we realized we were trapped. Suddenly, the mannequins began to move. Their joints creaked and groaned as they turned their heads to look at us, their eyes glowing with a sinister light. One of them stepped forward, its hand outstretched. We backed away, but there was nowhere to go. "Welcome," it rasped, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "You have been chosen." "Chosen for what?" Liam demanded, his voice trembling. The mannequin's smile widened, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. "For the ritual," it replied. "You will be our sacrifice." We were in way over our heads. This was no ordinary exhibition. These mannequins were connected to something ancient and malevolent, something that demanded blood. We needed to find a way out, and fast. As the mannequins closed in, we fought to keep our wits about us. The air grew heavy with the scent of decay, and a low, guttural chanting filled the room. I glanced around, desperate for an escape route. My eyes landed on the mirror in the center of the room. It seemed to shimmer and pulse, as if it held the key to our salvation. "Liam, the mirror!" I shouted, grabbing his arm. "Maybe it's a portal or something. We need to get to it." He nodded, and together we made a dash for the mirror, dodging the grasping hands of the mannequins. As we reached the mirror, a blinding light enveloped us, and the world around us seemed to dissolve. When the light faded, we found ourselves in a vast, shadowy realm. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and rotting vegetation. The ground beneath our feet was soft and uneven, and a dense fog obscured our surroundings. "Where are we?" Liam asked, his voice echoing in the gloom. "I don't know," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But we need to keep moving. There has to be a way out of here." We stumbled through the fog, our senses on high alert. Every rustle, every shadow seemed to harbor unseen dangers. As we pressed on, We came across a clearing. In the center stood a massive stone altar, covered in strange symbols and dried blood. "This must be where the sacrifices took place," Liam said, his voice filled with dread. I nodded, my stomach churning. "We need to find a way to stop this. If we can destroy the altar, maybe we can break the curse." Before we could formulate a plan, a group of mannequins emerged from the fog, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. They surrounded us, their hands outstretched. "Join us!" they chanted, their voices blending into a horrific symphony. "Become one with the darkness!" We fought with all our might, but the mannequins were relentless. Just as I thought we were done for, a brilliant light pierced the darkness. The mannequins recoiled, their eyes wide with fear. A figure stepped out of the light, cloaked in shimmering robes. They raised a hand, and the mannequins disintegrated into dust. "You must leave this place," the figure said, their voice calm and soothing. "The curse is ancient and powerful, but there is still hope." "Who are you?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I am a guardian of this realm," they replied. "The curse was placed here by an ancient cult that sought to harness the power of the mannequins for their own dark purposes. You must find the source of the curse and destroy it." "How do we do that?" Liam asked. "The mirror," the guardian said. "It is a conduit between your world and this one. You must find it and use it to destroy the altar. Only then will the curse be broken." With that, the guardian vanished, leaving us alone in the clearing. We exchanged determined glances and set off in search of the mirror. The journey was arduous, filled with unseen terrors and constant danger. The fog seemed to play tricks on our minds, and every step felt like a battle against an unseen force. But we pressed on, driven by the hope of ending the nightmare once and for all. After what felt like an eternity, we finally stumbled upon the mirror. It was embedded in the ground, its surface cracked and pulsing with a dark energy. "This is it," Liam said, his voice filled with resolve. "Let's end this." We approached the mirror, and I raised the heavy stone we had found along the way. With a deep breath, I brought it down on the mirror with all my strength. The surface shattered, and a blinding light enveloped us once more. When the light faded, we found ourselves back in the museum, the eerie atmosphere replaced by the familiar sights and sounds of our town. The mannequins were gone, and the air felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. We exchanged relieved smiles, knowing that we had survived the Museum of Nightmares, but the memory of that dark realm and the horrors we faced would stay with us forever. As we made our way out of the museum, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. I glanced back one last time, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a pair of glowing eyes in the shadows. But then they were gone, and we stepped out into the cool night air, grateful to be alive. Part 2. The Dark Awakening. We thought the nightmare was over, but we couldn't have been more wrong. The relief we felt upon leaving the museum was fleeting. Our sleep was plagued by vivid, horrifying dreams. Every night, I found myself back in that shadowy realm, running from unseen horrors, and waking up in a cold sweat. Liam had it worse. His screams would pierce the silence of the night, and he became a shadow of his former self. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I received a frantic call from Liam. His voice trembled with fear, and I could hear the heavy breathing and frantic pacing in the background. "You need to come over," he said, barely above a whisper. "It's happening again. I can't take it anymore." I grabbed my jacket and rushed to his place, my heart pounding in my chest. When I arrived, I found him sitting in the dark, his face illuminated by the flickering light of the television. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "They're coming for us," he said, his voice filled with despair. "The mannequins. They're still here." I tried to calm him down, but deep down, I felt the same fear. The sense of being watched, the eerie feeling that something was lurking in the shadows. It was all too real. We decided to head back to the museum, hoping to find some answers and put an end to our torment once and for all. The museum was closed, but we managed to slip in through a side door. The air inside was thick with the same metallic scent we remembered, and the dim lighting cast long, sinister shadows. The mannequins were back, arranged in the same disturbing tableau. As we ventured deeper into the exhibition, The atmosphere grew colder, and the air seemed to hum with a malevolent energy. We reached the room with the cracked mirror, and a wave of nausea washed over me. The mirror was gone, replaced by an altar covered in dark, twisted symbols. "We need to destroy the altar," I said, my voice trembling. "It's the source of the curse." Before we could move, the mannequins began to stir. Their eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and their movements were jerky and unnatural. They stepped off their pedestals, surrounding us with their cold, lifeless stares. "We can't fight them," Liam said, his voice barely audible. "We need to find another way." As the mannequins closed in, I noticed a faint glow emanating from the altar. The symbols seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. I realized that the altar was connected to the mirror somehow, and destroying it might be our only chance. "Cover me," I said, grabbing a heavy iron rod from the corner of the room. "I'm going to smash the altar." Liam nodded, his eyes wide with fear, but he stood his ground. As I approached the altar, the mannequins lunged at us, their hands outstretched. Liam fought them off as best he could, but they were relentless. With a primal scream, I brought the iron rod down on the altar. The impact sent a shockwave through the room, and the symbols began to glow brighter. The mannequins shrieked, their movements becoming more frantic. "Keep going!" Liam shouted, struggling to hold off the advancing mannequins. I raised the rod again and brought it down with all my strength. The altar cracked and a blinding light filled the room. The mannequins froze, their eyes dimming, and they crumbled into dust. The light enveloped us, and for a moment I felt weightless, suspended in a void. When the light faded, we found ourselves in a vast, desolate wasteland. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the ground was littered with bones and debris. "We're not out of the woods yet," Liam said, his voice tinged with despair. "We need to find the source of the curse and destroy it once and for all." We stumbled through the wasteland, the fog growing denser with each step. The eerie silence was broken only by the distant howling of the wind. As we pressed on, we came across a massive stone structure, its surface covered in the same twisted symbols we had seen on the altar. "This must be it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The heart of the curse." Before we could move, a group of figures emerged from the fog. They were clad in dark, tattered robes, their faces obscured by hoods. Their eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and they chanted in a language I couldn't understand. The figures raised their hands, and the ground beneath us began to tremble. The air grew colder, and a dark energy swirled around us. We were trapped, surrounded by an ancient evil that sought to consume us. "We have to destroy the structure," Liam said, his voice filled with determination. "It's the only way to break the curse." We charged at the structure, dodging the blasts of dark energy that the robed figures hurled at us. As we reached the base, I grabbed the iron rod and began to hammer at the symbols. The structure shuddered, and the ground beneath us cracked and splintered. The robed figures shrieked, their chants growing more frantic. The dark energy intensified, and I felt a cold, suffocating grip around my heart. But I couldn't stop now. With one final, desperate effort, I brought the rod down on the structure, shattering the symbols. A blinding light erupted from the cracks, and the ground beneath us gave way. We were enveloped in the light, and the world around us dissolved. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying on the cold, hard floor of the museum. The mannequins were gone, and the air felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. Liam lay beside me, his breathing steady, and his eyes slowly opening. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice weak but hopeful. "I think so," I replied, helping him to his feet. "We destroyed the source of the curse. It's finally over." We made our way out of the museum, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. The nightmare had ended, but the scars it left would stay with us forever. As we walked away from the museum, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next opportunity. But for now, we were free, and that was enough. Part 3. The Silent Echo. Freedom was a fragile illusion. In the weeks that followed our harrowing escape from the museum, Liam and I struggled to reclaim any semblance of normalcy. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by residual nightmares. Each day was a battle against the creeping dread that something was still amiss. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, the phone rang. It was Liam. His voice was shaky, barely a whisper. "They're back," he said, a quiver of fear in his tone. "The mannequins. I saw them." A chill ran down my spine. "Where?" "In my apartment. They were just standing there watching me. I thought I was losing my mind, but then they moved." I was at his place in minutes, my heart racing. When I arrived, Liam looked even worse than before, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. He led me to his bedroom where the mannequins had appeared. The room was empty, but the feeling of being watched was palpable. "They were right here," he insisted, his voice trembling. "I swear I saw them." I believed him. After everything we had been through, I knew better than to doubt the impossible. We had to find out why the mannequins were haunting us. There had to be something we missed, some lingering connection to the curse. We decided to revisit the museum, hoping to uncover more clues. The building loomed ominously in the night, its facade now more foreboding than ever. We slipped inside, the familiar metallic scent immediately hitting us. The exhibition was as we remembered, but there was an eerie silence, as if the place was holding its breath. As we moved through the rooms, I noticed a new addition to the display. A large, ancient book encased in glass. The cover was adorned with strange symbols, the same ones we had seen on the altar and the stone structure. "This must be it," I said, pointing to the book. "The source of the curse. We need to find a way to open it." We pried the glass case open and carefully took out the book. The pages were brittle, filled with incomprehensible text and disturbing illustrations. But one page stood out. It depicted the mannequins surrounding a large, ornate mirror, much like the one we had seen before. Below the image, there was a passage in an ancient language. "We need to translate this," Liam said. "It might tell us how to break the curse for good." Back at my apartment, we pored over the book, using every resource we could find to decipher the text. It was slow, painstaking work, but eventually, we managed to piece together the meaning. The passage described a ritual to summon and bind the mannequins, using the mirror as a conduit. But it also mentioned a way to banish them, a ritual involving the destruction of the mirror and the recitation of a specific incantation. "We need to go back to the museum and find that mirror," I said, determination in my voice. "It's the only way to end this." The next night, we returned to the museum, the book in tow. The air was thick with anticipation, and every creak and groan of the old building set us on edge. We made our way to the room where the mirror had been, but it was gone. "They must have moved it," Liam said, his voice filled with frustration. "But where?" We searched every room, every corner of the museum, but the mirror was nowhere to be found. As we stood in the main hall, despair creeping in, we heard a faint whispering. It was coming from behind a large, ornate door that we had never noticed before. We pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dark, lit only by the dim glow of candles. In the center stood the mirror, its surface cracked and pulsing with dark energy. The mannequins were there too, their eyes glowing with malevolent light. "We need to perform the ritual," I said, pulling out the book. "We don't have much time." As I began to recite the incantation, the mannequins stirred, their movements slow and deliberate. They advanced on us, their eyes fixed on the mirror. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and I turned to see Liam, his face pale with fear. "Hurry," he urged, his voice trembling. I continued the incantation, my voice growing louder and more confident. The air around us crackled with energy, and the mirror began to vibrate. The mannequins shrieked, their movements becoming more frantic. "Now!" I shouted, grabbing the iron rod we had brought with us. "Smash the mirror!" Liam took the rod and brought it down on the mirror with all his strength. The surface shattered, and a blinding light filled the room. The mannequins froze, their eyes dimming, and they crumbled into dust. The light enveloped us once more, and we felt the familiar sensation of being weightless, suspended in a void. When the light faded, we found ourselves back in the museum, the air lighter, the oppressive sense of dread gone. We exchanged relieved glances, knowing that we had finally broken the curse. But as we made our way out of the museum, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching us. In the days that followed, things began to return to normal. The nightmares stopped, and the eerie sense of being watched slowly faded. But there was a lingering unease, a sense that we had only scratched the surface of the ancient evil we had encountered. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a faint whispering. It was coming from the corner of my room. I turned on the light, my heart pounding, and saw a shadowy figure standing there. It was a mannequin, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. "We are not finished," it rasped, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "The curse cannot be broken. You will never be free." I screamed, and the figure vanished. I sat there trembling, knowing that the nightmare was far from over. The mannequins were still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their next opportunity. And so, the Museum of Nightmares lived on, a dark presence that would haunt us forever. Part 4. The Dark Convergence. The next few weeks were a blur of fear and paranoia. Liam and I couldn't shake the feeling that the mannequins were always just out of sight, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike. Every night, I would wake up drenched in sweat, haunted by visions of lifeless eyes and cold, grasping hands. One evening, I received a frantic call from Liam. His voice was barely recognizable, hoarse and trembling. "They're getting stronger," he whispered. "I saw them moving in the daylight. They're not just in the shadows anymore." A cold dread settled over me. If the mannequins could move freely in the daylight, we were in even more danger than we had realized. We needed to find a permanent solution, something that would end the curse once and for all. We decided to seek help from an expert in the occult. After some research, we found Dr. Evelyn Cartwright, a renowned occultist who had written extensively about ancient curses and dark rituals. We made an appointment and hoped she could provide the answers we so desperately needed. Dr. Cartwright's office was in an old, creaky building filled with strange artifacts and books that seemed to pulse with dark energy. She was an imposing figure, with piercing eyes that seemed to see right through us. We told her everything, about the museum, the mannequins, and the rituals we had performed. She listened intently, her expression growing graver with each word. When we finished, she leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled. "You've stumbled upon something very old and very powerful," she said. "The curse you're dealing with is not just a simple haunting. It's a binding ritual tied to an ancient cult that worshipped dark entities. These entities demand sacrifices to maintain their power." "Is there any way to stop them?" Liam asked, desperation clear in his voice. Dr. Cartwright nodded. "There is, but it's not going to be easy. You need to perform a counter-ritual to sever the connection between the mannequins and the dark entities. This will involve going back to the museum and confronting the source of the curse directly." She handed us a thick, ancient tome filled with strange symbols and incantations. "Everything you need is in here. Follow the instructions exactly, and you might just have a chance." Armed with the tome, we prepared for our final confrontation. The museum loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the night sky. We entered cautiously, the familiar metallic scent and oppressive atmosphere greeting us like old enemies. We made our way to the room where the mirror had been, the book clutched tightly in my hands. As we began to set up for the ritual, the air grew colder, and a low, guttural chanting filled the room. "They know we're here," Liam said, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, focusing on the task at hand. We drew the symbols on the floor with chalk, lit the candles, and began to recite the incantations from the book. The chanting grew louder, and the shadows in the room seemed to come alive, swirling around us. As we reached the final part of the incantation, the mannequins appeared, their eyes glowing with a fierce, malevolent light. They moved towards us, their hands outstretched. But this time, we were ready. With a shout, we finished the incantation, and the symbols on the floor began to glow. A blinding light filled the room, and the mannequins shrieked in agony. The light intensified, and the mannequins disintegrated into dust, their screams echoing in the void. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the ground beneath us began to shake, and the walls of the museum cracked and crumbled. The dark energy that had filled the building dissipated, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. We stumbled out of the museum, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. We had done it. The curse was broken, and the mannequins were gone. Or so we thought. In the following days, life began to return to normal. The nightmares stopped, and the eerie feeling of being watched gradually faded. But just as we started to believe that we were finally free, strange things began to happen again. One evening, as I was walking home, I noticed a figure standing in the distance. It was a mannequin, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. Panic surged through me as I realized that the curse wasn't truly broken. The dark entities were still out there, and they were not finished with us yet. Desperation set in as we realized that the mannequins were growing stronger, more persistent. We needed to find another way to end this, something more permanent. Dr. Cartwright's words echoed in my mind. The curse you're dealing with is not just a simple haunting. It's a binding ritual tied to an ancient cult. We returned to Dr. Cartwright, hoping she might have more insights. When we arrived, her office was in disarray, books and artifacts scattered everywhere. She greeted us with a grim expression. "I've been doing more research," she said. "The curse you're dealing with is tied to an artifact that once belonged to the cult. Destroying the mannequins and performing the counter-ritual weakened the curse, but to truly end it, you need to find and destroy this artifact." She handed us a map, marked with an old abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. "This is where the cult used to meet. The artifact should be there. Be careful. It's likely guarded by dark forces." The mansion was a decaying ruin, overgrown with ivy and surrounded by an oppressive silence. We made our way inside, the air thick with the scent of mold and decay. The halls were lined with eerie portraits, their eyes seeming to follow us as we moved. Following Dr. Cartwright's map, we descended into the basement. The air grew colder, and a sense of malevolent energy pressed in on us. We found a hidden door, covered in the same twisted symbols we had seen before. Inside, we found a small chamber filled with strange artifacts and a large ornate box in the center. The box pulsed with a dark energy, and I knew we had found the source of the curse. As we approached the box, the air grew thick with a palpable sense of danger. Suddenly, the mannequins appeared, their eyes glowing with a fierce, malevolent light. They moved towards us, their hands outstretched. But this time, we were ready. We recited the incantation from Dr. Cartwright's book, and the symbols on the floor began to glow. A blinding light filled the chamber, and the mannequins shrieked in agony. The light intensified, and the mannequins disintegrated into dust, their screams echoing in the void. With a deep breath, I opened the box. Inside was a dark, twisted idol, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. We knew what we had to do. With a determined cry, Liam smashed the idol with the iron rod. A deafening roar filled the chamber, and a wave of dark energy erupted from the idol, shaking the very foundations of the mansion. The walls cracked and crumbled, and the ground beneath us began to give way. We ran, barely making it out before the mansion collapsed in on itself. The dark energy dissipated, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. We stood there breathless, watching as the ruins of the mansion settled into silence. In the days that followed, the mannequins were nowhere to be seen. The nightmares stopped, and the eerie feeling of being watched gradually faded. We had done it. The curse was finally broken. But as we walked away from the ruins, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next opportunity. For now, we were free. But we knew that the dark forces we had encountered were ancient and powerful, and they would not rest easily. The Museum of Nightmares had left its mark on us, a dark presence that would haunt us forever. Part 5. The Final Reckoning. The weight of our ordeal began to lift, but the sense of unease never truly left us. As days turned into weeks, we tried to resume our lives, hoping the shadows of the past would stay buried. Yet there was always a lingering fear, a sense that something wasn't quite right. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a series of rapid knocks on my door. Startled, I opened it to find Liam standing there, drenched in sweat, his face ashen. "They're back," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I saw them, more than I ever thought possible. They're in the city now." Panic surged through me. If the mannequins were spreading beyond the museum, it meant the curse had evolved, becoming something more dangerous and pervasive. We needed to confront this head-on before it consumed everything we cared about. We regrouped at my apartment and pored over the ancient tome once more, looking for any hints we might have missed. The pages were worn and tattered, but we managed to find a passage that mentioned a final ritual, one that could seal the curse permanently, but required the convergence of two powerful artifacts, one to bind the curse and the other to dispel it. Dr. Cartwright's map had led us to the mansion and the artifact we destroyed, but what about the other artifact? We needed to find it, and quickly. We headed back to the ruins of the mansion, hoping that any surviving clues might lead us to the second artifact. As we approached the site, we noticed something peculiar. The area was eerily calm, almost too calm. The wreckage of the mansion lay in silent disarray, as if it were waiting for us. Inside the rubble, we found a hidden chamber that had survived the collapse. In the center of this chamber was a pedestal with an old, ornate box, its surface covered in intricate symbols. With a sense of foreboding, we opened the box to reveal an artifact, a dark, ominous crystal that seemed to absorb the light around it. "This must be it," I said, my voice trembling. "The artifact to dispel the curse." As we examined the crystal, the air grew colder, and a low, menacing hum filled the chamber. The mannequins had followed us, their shadowy forms emerging from the darkness. Their eyes glowed with an intense, otherworldly light, and their movements were more fluid and determined than before. "We need to get out of here," Liam said urgently. "They're getting stronger." We fled the chamber, the mannequins closing in with unnerving speed. As we raced through the wreckage, we noticed a figure watching us from the shadows. It was Dr. Cartwright, her expression grave and unreadable. "I've been following you," she said, her voice echoing in the dark. "You found the crystal. Now you must use it to complete the ritual and destroy the curse once and for all." "But how?" I asked, desperation in my voice. "The book," Dr. Cartwright interrupted. "The ritual must be performed under the light of a full moon. You must place the crystal at the center of the curse's source and recite the final incantation. Only then will the curse be broken." We followed her instructions, heading to a secluded grove on the outskirts of town, where the full moon cast an eerie glow over the landscape. We set up the ritual as described, placing the crystal at the center of a circle of symbols drawn in salt. As we began the incantation, the air grew charged with dark energy, and the ground trembled. The mannequins appeared, their eyes glowing with an almost sentient malevolence. They advanced on us, their movements more fluid and purposeful than ever. "We're almost there," Dr. Cartwright said, her voice filled with determination. "Keep going." The ritual reached its climax as the crystal began to pulse with a blinding light. The mannequins shrieked and writhed in pain, their forms distorting and flickering. The light from the crystal intensified, and the ground beneath us seemed to open, revealing a swirling abyss of darkness. With one final, resolute cry, we completed the incantation. The light from the crystal surged, engulfing the mannequins in the abyss in a wave of blinding energy. The darkness retreated, and the mannequins disintegrated into dust, their screams fading into silence. Exhausted but relieved, we stood in the quiet aftermath of the ritual. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and the grove was peaceful once more. The curse was finally broken, and the threat of the mannequins had been eradicated. Dr. Cartwright smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting a mix of satisfaction and sadness. "You've done it. The curse is broken, and the artifacts have been returned to their rightful place." As we left the grove, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. We had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged victorious, but the experience had left its mark on us. The nightmares were gone, but the memories of the Museum of Nightmares would stay with us forever. In the days that followed, life began to return to normal. The city was safe once more, and the shadows of the past began to recede. But as I walked through the familiar streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that the world was filled with hidden dangers, waiting in the darkness. The Museum of Nightmares had been a trial like no other, and while we had vanquished the evil that had haunted us, we knew that the echoes of our experience would linger, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lies just beyond the light. So, my friends, that's the end of the story. You can go to my playlist and see many more interesting scary stories.